Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm here with Ed Jordan. Ed has been kind enough to come on. I actually reached out to him. He is the chief commercial officer at Humanigen, but I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit more. But thank you for coming on, Ed.
It's my pleasure, Darshan. Thank you for having me today. As mentioned, I'm the chief commercial officer of Humanigen. We are a pre-commercial biotech organization. Although I haven't spent my entire career in biotech, only about half of the 30 years. The first half were spent in big pharma companies like Schering-Plough, Merck, and Teva. And then I transitioned and really wanted to try my hand at smaller, more entrepreneurial companies and spent time at AMAG, DBV, and Humanigen.
So you've had a bit of a varied career. So did you ever actually carry the bag?
Absolutely, and I think that's the most important role in the pharma and biotech organization. It's where the customer and the organization meet, and the representative really is the face of the organization. And I don't think there's a more important individual in the company, and nor do I think I think that's the most important role as well.
So I find it really interesting. So you said 30 years. So you've actually been in sales and commercial since the 1990s. Is that accurate?
Yeah. 1992 to be exact. And
okay.
A number of different roles. I mentioned carried the bag, managed markets, first line management, home office roles in marketing and international and operations. Ran joint ventures, led and integrated organizations, bought companies, sold companies. It's been quite an adventure, but I would say sales, operational, and leadership roles.
So the reason I asked that question is we've seen over the course of especially the last 10 years, but you started looking back at 20 and 30 years, the evolving role of commercial. It started off being, I remember the 1990s, for lack of a better term, it was relationship-based marketing. It probably is to a certain extent, to a large extent, still relationship-based marketing. But it was how much can doctors how can you build that relationship with doctors so that they can prescribe your drug more? But it then became educational, and it's sort of been evolving over time. Can you talk a little bit about the trends you've seen to where you are now?
Sure. I would say in the 90s, it was share of voice, and it was feet on the street. Is how many representatives you could put out there, and it was a very easy equation. It's like how many PDEs, physician detail equivalents, could you deliver, and the more reps, the more PDEs, and it was quite an easy equation to unlock. That's definitely changed. We hit a saturation point. There was a reduction in sales and customer-facing roles, and today it's clearly shifting more towards digital engagement and other ways to interact with the physician other than just the representative. But the representative role is going to go away. As mentioned, that relationship is very important, and the feet on the street will remain an integral part of the commercial model. It will just be supplemented with other activities, and that's what we're seeing today.
I really want to dig into the last piece you mentioned, which is the roles evolved to being feet on the streets combined, augmented by digital. What I want to talk a little bit about though is that early to mid 2000s, you started getting the Physician Payment Sunshine Act. You started getting the Pharma Code, all saying, can be talking to doctors in the same way, can be giving doctors a bunch of stuff. Did that have a huge impact in the way you engage, or a good salesperson would have already have shifted away? What was your take at that point?
I think both. It definitely changed the engagement in the engagement model for the better, and it became more educational and more scientific based. Many representatives could adapt to that. Others had challenging experiences with it. It became more scientific, and the scientific exchange kind of stepped up. And that's kind of where I see it today. So I think it was ultimately for the better, and it helped drive the change and the engagement.
So that's interesting. So it changed it to be more scientific. I remember, again, I came out of pharmacy school in the early 2000s, and you always talked about the amazingly attractive pharmaceutical reps who'd walk through, and there was this general perception that they may not know as much, but they're going to bring you meals. And that's awesome, because as a pharmacist who's just out, or as a pharmacy student who's just out, you're looking for those free meals. That changed, and you're saying that we now move towards this educational, scientific discussion. And I don't want to use the term scientific discussion because it has specific meaning, but we've moved towards a more educational type discussion environment. Was it difficult for people to sort of pivot for sales, for commercial to pivot from the first to the second?
I don't think so. I don't think so. There's always a natural transition and an advancement of the sales model. So it was simply change, and some people can accept change more easily than others.
Okay, thank you. So now we're in the space, as you said, where we're talking about digital being this new transition that we're talking about. What are the big digital tools that you're seeing commercial use on a consistent basis that's affecting how you engage? Obviously, a CRM is your sort of jump off point, but what else are you seeing?
Yeah. I'd take a step back, and I'd start by looking at the physician practices and how they have changed recently. And COVID definitely helped drive this. But there's some data out with McKinsey and Accenture that, we look at like virtual visits, which physicians are doing today. 2 years ago, that just didn't happen. Over 50% of physicians are doing virtual visits today. I think the stat is 42% of them have adapted their prescribing habits to coincide with virtual visits. And the majority of physicians continue to do virtual visits. And there's some specialties that are doing it exclusively now. So the practices have changed. And as the practices and customers change, we have to change as an industry to deliver them content which is applicable and desirable and timely. And digital is one of the ways we can do that.
I find that really interesting. The reason I find it interesting is I feel like I've had similar conversations for like the last 5 years, where we were talking about, doctors don't want to meet sales reps anymore. And how do I get in? And then, you need to go stop by pharmacy, and they're going to decide if you're going to go see a doctor and blah, blah, blah. And there was that gatekeeping that was happening. And what you're talking about now is this movement towards, and COVID obviously accelerated this, where they're saying we want to move into hardcore e-detailing, if you will. How do you even access them? Do they just sort of give you a card and say, talk to me, like make an appointment and talk to me? Or is there a different format and you're just engaging? How is this lead gen sort of happening?
So the engagement model has changed, but elements of it remain the same. So you mentioned gatekeeper. 30 years ago, there was a gatekeeper too, and that person was at the front desk. Today, the gatekeeper might be a hospital system. It might be an online booking and coordination of calendars, but it does exist today as well. That same data that I referenced earlier, the McKinsey data, 68% of physicians now prefer what they call a hybrid model. And the hybrid model of commercialization is a combination of live visits supplemented with virtual visits like this. And I always think about it, it's no different than the physician interacting probably with their lawyer or their financial planner. And sometimes they meet live at the office, and other times they simply have a virtual visit based on the convenience and the level of acceptance where we are today with virtual visits.
So it's funny you say lawyer, so I can speak to that experience, right? I can tell you that in the last 5 years, I could probably count on one hand the number of actual live visits I've had. There's just no reason to. I've totally moved over to a virtual model. Obviously, COVID helped that a lot, but even before, I'd already started moving and transitioning to that to that phase. Do you find that you're able to build the same trust, the same connection, or do you find that there's something missing?
I think that hybrid model certainly helps. So if you're seeing them live occasionally and supplemented with the virtual visits, it works just fine.
And how is that affecting, for example, onboarding a new salesperson? How do you train them to meet these new goals? Well, to them, they aren't new. They're just sort of goals, but yeah.
So the relationships which the representatives possess have never been more valuable than they are today. Because if you're the physician and I'm the representative and I already know you and I already have your contact information and I can text you, I can call you, I can Zoom you, I mean, that's more than half the battle right there.
Right.
So, in the last couple of roles when I've been looking at building sales forces, the relationship that the individual has in the territory, in the has never been more important.
So are you saying that if you are already a sales rep, that obviously gives you a leg up? What if you're a new person?
Yeah.
How are you building that relationship? Because you can't shake a physical hand anymore. Well, not as much anymore.
Well, not as much, but I think that's where it starts. And I think
Okay.
all relationships kind of start on the ground.
And has that so you're still seeing a lot of physical detailing that's happening, a physical conversation that are happening that then get augmented using your Zooms and your texts and everything else. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess it's also augmented by digital communications, and that could be your lead generation in many cases as well, where you're pushing information out to these physicians. They're grabbing it, they're consuming it, and they're requesting more information, which could be the warm entry for that new representative into the office.
And what are the tools you're seeing for enabling that process? What is making your life easier? Obviously, you're using emails. Are there any other tools you're sort of pulling into?
Oh, absolutely. Pharma and biotech has incredible data. We've got data on the physicians. We've got information on when they engage digitally, what they engage with, how they engage with, at what time. The trick is bringing it all together, and being able to master this large data, and to help deliver the right information at the right time. But absolutely, in addition to virtual visits, you got banner ads, you get CMEs, you got customer meetings, you've got virtual engagements. I mean, there's a number of different channels that can be delivered to the physician digitally and then supplemented with representatives. And all this is called kind of omni-channel marketing.
So that's the big buzzword right now, right? Everyone's talking omni-channel. And when I've always heard the word omni-channel, it's always been the many ways I can connect to the target audience.
Right.
What's been difficult is exactly what you're pointing to, which is, yes, you can target them in many, many ways, but are you collecting all of that data in a more comprehensive way to know how it all worked together? And are there tools that are doing a good job over other tools connecting all that data, or do you still have to build custom tools for something like that?
Absolutely. And 75% of the customers, the physicians, say they're just overwhelmed. They're just like, too much data is being just pushed to them in a manner which is not synchronized and not specific. So reps, digital, DTC, CME, banner ads, journal ads, teledetails, society meetings. Imagine all these things just coming at the physician in a manner which is not coordinated.
Right.
Now, as mentioned, we've got great data on all of these. The trick, to your point, is how do you bring it together and how do you make it smart and make it learn over time? It's clearly artificial intelligence and machine learning, and that's where this industry is going. And I don't think we're in the space of building it. To your point, we have to go out and partner with organizations. And that's what they do, and there are many organizations out there that do it well. I've done it, and I've done it with them. It's a way of, it's true omni-channel in a smart manner.
for someone like you who's sort of been through all of this, it's kind of fun to ask you these questions because you've seen it done the hard way. And then you just mentioned AI, which everyone right now is using as this general tool that can mean anything you want it to mean at this moment. So right now, the big piece I've heard is we're going to use AI, and that's going to make all things better. No, the problem, the AI tools I've used are at best interesting, but they lack sophistication. How do you ensure, for your own purposes, that the tools you're using meet your goals, or do they sort of just spit out an answer and you don't know why that was the answer it came up with?
Well, there's ways you can test it. You can run kind of A/B logic against it, and you can take one state and exclude them from the equation and see what happens. You can do two different arms of physicians and specialties and see which responds better. So you always test it, and that's what I've done in my past. Is you test it and you become comfortable with it. And again, it's the technology coupled with the representative, which gives you a better, smarter approach to doing it. Back in the 90s, you want to put 250 reps against it, it's going to cost you $70 million today to do it, right? Yeah. You just can't do it, right? It's too expensive in this environment to do that. So I can get the same bang for a lot less buck using omnichannel.
So let me take a step back for the people who are listening, quite honestly for myself, because I'm learning so much just listening to you. We as chief commercial officer, your job is to come up with an entire strategy on how all of this is going to work together. You're building the relationships to make this all happen. How you in this specific instance, in the company you're with, which is Humanigen, you mentioned that it's pre-commercial. How does this all come together for a pre-commercial company? Because in the end, you might be messaging all these people, but to what end?
Okay, so a couple different examples. I've used the same technology for patient recruitment into phase 3 trials.
Oh, wow. Okay.
How do we get more specific patients into the trials quicker? And gets you to your result quicker and gets you into the market quicker, hopefully. So the same technology can be utilized there.
So it's not just the point you're making is it's all how you leverage it. And it's funny, I saw you until you made that point more as a commercial officer, but what you're also talking about is those same skills are so transferable across the entire value chain. There's always been this Chinese wall between commercial and clinical, or commercial and clinical trials, whatever you want to call it. How receptive are other members to your expertise, quite bluntly? How does that sort of work?
I think it depends on the size of the company as well, right? The larger companies are more siloed and more specific. You get into smaller biotech companies, hey, there's only 10 of us in the company, so we're going to be a lot more collaborative, and I'm going to be involved in a lot more things than I would at a large pharma company.
Okay.
So being able to take this knowledge, apply it to clinical, apply it to medical, and you do it in a way which is compliant.
And talk to me about that. I mean, I don't know in the case of Humanigen, but I don't know if you guys have commercial officers yet. It seems a little early, but do you have a commercial officer or a legal team at this moment?
We outsource that.
You outsource that. Do you find
people like you?
Well, hopefully one day. But the question I have is, when you have, do you find those individuals helping the process, or is it more on a as needed basis? I mean, I'm thinking more like usually you'll have PRC committees as you're growing and sort of building, and they'll run through all of these concepts with you. Do you find that it's early on where you can build that relationship, and what is the best way you build that relationship with your legal team, whether it's insourced or outsourced?
I don't think anybody has all the good ideas cornered. So to that end, you leverage their experience. You set up the objective very early of what we're trying to do, and then talk about how we're going to do it. I always get the best experience when I brought people, experts, subject matter experts into the process early and got their opinion and buy-in, opposed to waiting until the very end and kind of surprising them with strategy and tactics.
And it's funny you say that, because I've been on both sides of that equation, and you get labeled with the are you gatekeeping where we're going to go, and on the other hand, if you do it right and you become more of a collaborative approach person, you'd land up in the scenario of, okay, you're enabling this in a more comprehensive way. How do you approach that team building approach? Who do you think is your core group that you start with to say, here's the direction we want to pursue, here's who we need at the table to start with? We can always add more people, but here's the first 3 or 4 people. Is that always situation dependent?
Marketing, legal, and kind of the executive leadership. And I think it always starts with kind of the critical success factors that the company puts forward. This is something that I always do in my last 2 roles is, all right, let's get between medical, marketing, and legal, let's determine kind of the 5 big critical success factors which we have to achieve to be successful. And then what falls under the critical success factors are your strategies and tactics. And if the strategy and tactic doesn't align to a critical success factor, you shouldn't be doing it. And it really kind of brings the organization together, and it results in really good alignment.
Very interesting. It's a really interesting approach, because that's how you always think that things should work. And my experience has always been, again, maybe more as outside counsel, you get called in at the last moment. So I think it's kind of fun to see you working in that more collaborative way. I think as I discussed with you, this is probably about a 20-25 minute talk. I feel like I've taken up your time. But before we go, any last parting words for people who are going, what does this all mean? What are all the tools that are out there? Who can I talk to? And how can I reach Ed?
You're more than welcome to reach out and speak to me. I can be reached at ejordan@humanigen.com. I'd be happy to share my experiences, share kind of the partners that I've used to get to this point, and to help them think through their business needs.
Awesome. Ed, thank you again for coming on. This video and podcast is brought to you by the Kulkarni Law Firm. Reach out to the Kulkarni Law Firm for advice on third-party issues, state board issues, contracting, pharmacy